We back, everybody. Welcome to the wrong side of history. I'm Ben Gleib.
Who finds himself frequently on the wrong side of history. I am Lee Trink.
Painful. Your insults hurt me. I can't fall asleep
I know.
at night.
I'm so, I feel badly.
What incisive commentary that I'm sure is going to stop at the intro. We created this podcast because we're all in our different silos and our echo chambers. We only see one side, and then occasional people trickle into social media and say, you're on the wrong side of history. And so we wanted to have the conversation together, to burst that bubble, to break through the noise and have the conversation directly and be able to insult each other to our faces, at least.
Exactly. There's no more discourse in the world. There's shouting at people. There's people who don't want to discuss anything with the other side. And so we thought, let's come together. Let's show people how you could actually exchange ideas, have some strong debate, and have a cocktail and cheers, and at the end of it, and hopefully have some consensus.
Have some consensus, agree on some things. Since we agreed to sit down, have a drink, we'll cheers at the beginning, and we might cheers when we agree on certain things throughout. And listen, we have 3 topics that we chose today that seem to be, people see it very differently on their own side of the aisle. Do you want to tell us, Lee, a little overview of what the 3 topics are today, and then we'll dive in?
Sure. We're going to start with Biden and his health conditions and other things that have come up over the last week or so. That's
partisan. Yep.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Trump and the administration's trip to the Middle East, and we are going to end with the Trump budget proposal for next year.
The big, beautiful bill.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I love it. So you suggested the Biden health topic. I didn't even dive into this one very deeply because I don't even know what you're going to say. I don't know what the issue could be. So just hit me with it, and then we will discuss.
So here's how I would frame the issue. The left, the Democrats, the media, who I think are in cahoots with the Democrats. I actually think that the legacy media, most of the legacy media, is an arm of the Democratic Party. I think they talk a lot about the threat to democracy. They talk about Trump being a threat to democracy. Now, it's interesting to me that a lot of things that are big threats on the front end sort of go away, like how he was going to take away all women's rights. That was a huge thing coming into the election, going out of the election, and then we never heard it. We never heard anything again about it.
There's stuff that are taking away women's access to the healthcare they need, even in this tax bill.
What I'm saying
we'll get to it.
What I'm saying is it was hysteria, and there was then almost nothing. And so I think that
because it's been 3.5 months, and there's a billion other things that have happened so far. He hasn't yet dived deep into women's rights being taken away yet, but the new bill does start touching on it.
It's another thing. There's a lot of fear mongering about what he will do, the prospective will do. Let's talk about what Biden actually did, not the threat of Trump, some theoretical destruction of democracy. Let's talk about Biden's actual destruction of democracy. Here you had Biden, his family, the Democratic Party, and legacy media all conspire to hide the president's decaying health, his inability to do the work. They somehow put the guy up to go run again. And at the end, of course, we know what happened. They pulled the plug on him.
He's still alive. I don't even know what that means.
Are you sure?
I'm not positive.
So I look at it and go, isn't this it's a great example of the left demonizes Trump about some theoretical destruction of democracy while they actually prevented and thwarted democracy, not theoretically, not prospectively.
Give me specifically, what do you mean? Covering up somebody's health is different than where they thwarted democracy?
Was in cognitive decline.
Yeah.
And everybody, all the Democratic leadership echoed how sharp he was. I remember Mayorkas was talking about it's so difficult to prepare for a meeting with him because it was so deeply probing. And now we come to find out that the guy was working half days, that he was rehearsed for certain cabinet meetings. The guy was not in charge. And so and now when I look at it on the macro, I look at this situation and I say, okay, we have a president that hid his ailing health from us. And they hid his
my ailing health from you with that cough, sorry.
Yeah, it's a good thing COVID's done. Is it done?
No, I do have COVID right now.
Oh, okay, super. They hit his health, they hit his cognitive decline, and not only did it happen within the administration, and the press secretary lied to our faces, the other leadership of the administration lied to our faces, and CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, they all followed suit. They all fell in line, and I'm shocked to hear, Jake Tapper came out with his book, and a lot of this came out through his book. And he's one of the people that hid this from the American people. And so you have, again, Trump with some theoretical constitutional crisis, threat to democracy. It somehow never comes. And we have the Democrats on the other side actually thwarted democracy by masking the president's failing health. And yet,
okay, you already said that. You need to recap your own points.
I'm recapping my own
points. Okay,
right.
so let me first tell you what I agree with what you said, and then I'll tell you what I disagree with. So, yeah, there was definitely an underplaying and some degree of cover-up of Biden's decaying health. I think it's not quite the story that you're making it out to be, because it was very clear from the beginning. When I ran for president, if those you don't know listening, I ran for president in the 2020 election. I was saying all the time in my stump speeches at events I spoke following Biden that he doesn't finish his sentences, even back then, and he is not cognitively in the place to run for president again, in a place where I could feel super comfortable with it. And that was talked about. He was losing his train of thought during the debates in the 2020 election.
Okay, but everybody came in.
I'm not saying it's a huge positive. Once it's in the clear, then it's just an obvious fact. We elected a very old man because he was better than an existential threat to our democracy, which Trump is. And so the part that
it's so disingenuous to me. He's some theoretical threat.
No, I'll tell you where he's not a theoretical threat. I don't know. You just shifted from saying he's a theoretical threat to women's rights, and now he's a theoretical threat to democracy.
Yeah.
He's an actual threat to both. And so we'll talk later about what he's doing to restrict women's rights in his new big, beautiful bill.
Interesting.
But he is the worst for democracy. He's literally taking people's due process away. We've already talked about it in this podcast.
We've had a president that wasn't actually effectuating the office, and we had a massive cover-up, and somehow the Democrats, and it seemed you want to say, yeah, this was a problem, but it's not a big problem. It's a real problem. You're talking about...
There's been a long history, sadly, in this country of people hiding the true health nature of presidents. It's not like Trump is the most cognitively sharp person in the world.
I think he is.
Woman, man, TV.
You may disagree with how he talks, but I don't think there's anything cognitively problem. But I look at it as this is a persistent problem with the Democrats. The Democrats...
Wait, but let me finish saying how he's a problem to democracy. So, I mean, obviously, do you want me to dive back into January 6th? Do you want me to dive back into pretending he didn't lose the election when he did, and undermining the very fiber of our elections?
Let's do that for... If you want to talk about January 6th...
No, but I'm answering your question. It's very important because those are bedrock issues moving forward. To me, it's different to cover up a person's health than on
a person, the president of the United States' health,
than on a broad scale to say our democracy no longer matters, or elections no longer matters. Trump's lying to us about the election every second.
That's his viewpoint. His viewpoint was shared by who's shared by other people.
And Biden's viewpoint is that he's cognitively fine. What does it matter what his viewpoint is? There's facts. If you want me to acknowledge facts about Biden, you acknowledge facts about Trump. He lies about the election. He lies about democracy. He lies that Jan 6 was a day of peace. He lies that people don't due process. He lies that he doesn't know whether or not he needs to give people due process or whether he has to even follow the Constitution, which you said in an interview with Kristen Welker the other day. Those are all complete lies and just anti-constitutional facts. So I'm acknowledging you, but this is the problem with Trump derangement syndrome on the Trump follower side that I think is just underdiagnosed on your side. I'm willing, and people generally on the left are willing to acknowledge reality.
No, they're not.
Acknowledge.
No, they're not.
I just told you I agree that Biden had this issue, that Biden was cognitively not sharp, that I was the first to call
you
for
say that is an actual...
You won't acknowledge any of the things that I just said about Trump that are facts. You won't acknowledge any of them. Are any of those things true about Trump?
I think that, again, we're going to go down a rabbit hole on January 6th. We can do a full episode.
What you just said last week to Kristen Welker, I don't know if I have to enforce the Constitution. I don't know. I don't know if I have to do that. It's not his oath of office. So does he have to do that or not? Was he wrong about that?
He was wrong about that. He doesn't need to enforce the Constitution. But again, we're talking about things that people you don't like what he says, but you're like a lot of Democrats. They somehow want to pretend that this wasn't a big issue. Who was running the country? Who was running the country when this guy is in cognitive decline? It is not some small issue.
And his administration that was doing a pretty good job of running the
pattern. It's a pattern of the way Democrats operate. It's a pattern of the Democrats want to pursue their own agenda regardless of the impact as it has and the desires of the American people. Yeah,
Democratic policies in every way are what the American people want.
Hillary.
What does that statement mean? Explain what that statement meant.
What I mean by
that. About the people. I'm talking about the policies. Overwhelmingly, policies the vast majority of the American public want are Democratic policies. And the Republicans are just great at pushing these culture wars and these character assassinations that make people think that side is the one that is against democracy. And I grant that is one
of the most insane things that you said. The Democrats are the ones who wage the culture war. The Democrats are the ones that can't define what a woman, and the Democrats are the ones that have untold genders, that are only doing identity politics.
The Republicans are the ones that are currently pushing anti-furry litter box bills in schools, even though they can't identify one school where it actually happens that kids identify as cats. They're the ones that are up in arms about the sexiness of M&Ms. They're the ones that are up in arms about trans issues that are a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage, and they act as though it's the greatest issue facing America today.
Here's what
you're
missing. It's not the Republicans. It's the American people. It's the American people that care about these issues. And when they look at issues around trans, around what's happening with gender, with women in sports, that's why he was elected. And that's why he was elected by the majority of voters.
Right, because they successfully fearmongered those issues.
They didn't successfully fearmonger. Those issues and those policies behind them are categorically insane, if you ask me. My opinion, those issues are insane. Trans rights, usurping women's rights, not okay.
Everybody should have rights. Be careful the way you're using that word. Everybody should have human rights.
Human rights, but the policies behind a lot of Democratic viewpoints were that trans rights would usurp women's rights. They would. They did in terms of issues like trans in sports, trans in bathrooms. Those rights were given precedent over women's rights.
Overall, on those issues, like I said before, I tend to agree with you on that, and I think the Democrats were way too. The left in this issue is way too accommodating in fear of offending any minority group. And on the whole, because I don't really identify with a particular party, but I am on the left, certainly, on the left policies be dictated by that rather than caring about kitchen table bread and butter issues.
That's right.
Is why we lost the election.
I agree with that.
I agree with that 100%. We can cheers on that.
Okay, yes, we can cheers on that.
Okay. But that said, on the actual kitchen table issues that matter, on the economic issues, and we're going to be getting into that in a minute, on the actual issues that matter for people's lives day to day, the Democrats and the left, generally speaking, fight for the average person, and the right,
I think
the Republicans fight for the ultra wealthy.
I think you're.
That's not what most people are, unfortunately.
I think you're wrong, and we'll get to it when we talk about the budget. But I think the story of this is this administration is fighting for the middle class. They're fighting overall for the middle class.
That's ridiculous.
For traditional American values, and
they're fighting for the middle class in no way whatsoever.
Okay, but we'll get to it
but also, the conspiratorial thinking on the right is not helpful to anybody.
About what?
Having Donald Trump Jr. tweet when we hear that our former president has stage 5 cancer, tweet, how did Dr. Jill Biden not know about this? Yet another cover-up.
It is, because it is a cover-up.
She's a PhD.
The whole point is this is
not a medical doctor.
She should have known. The doctors for sure knew. If you talk to any doctor who commented on this, A third world country could have diagnosed.
They for sure knew, and they just didn't give him treatment. Didn't put him into a massive chemotherapy treatment.
They knew, and they hid it from all of us, and maybe as a result didn't treat him properly. Whatever it is, this guy was in no position to lead this country, and there was a massive cover up to keep that information from the American public. Period. Not only from him, his family, the administration, and media.
How's Trump's miraculously healed ear doing? Pretty good? Is it doing pretty well?
Yeah.
Perfect ear. It's got shot in it. Remember he said it exploded, had that huge bandage on it, and now he's perfectly fine.
Was that a blood packet that exploded on his ear? Is that
question? You're asking? It's a very good question.
Again, classic. This is the classic leftist view of talk about things that aren't reality, and when it comes to things that are real fires burning, to say there's nothing to see here. That's where I look at. I look at this issue with Biden and the cover up and the media as a colossal failure of the entire system. Shame on the administration for not highlighting it, and shame on journalists for covering for him, for not doing their job. It's an insult. It's an insult to the American people. It really is. That Jake Tapper and the New York Times and MSNBC and Joe Scarborough all lined up to hide this information from the American public. Not only that, they chastised the right, they chastised conservative media as if it was fantasy. They literally said that some of the videos that they were posting were manufactured videos.
They weren't saying they were manufactured. They were saying they were selectively edited or selectively shot. And I agree with you. On that. That was a real failure. And probably Trump wouldn't be president now if they had handled that differently.
And I think it's a persistent problem.
A year into his term. I think, and in defense slightly of all the people you're saying, of the media, all this, I don't think it was as broadly seen in his term until the very end, until he started really having those problems during the last year.
They all wanted us to not believe our own eyes. They made the American public feel stupid. Everyone from his press secretary to Kamala Harris to Gavin Newsom to Hakeem Jeffries to every legacy left media organization, they talked to the American public like it was foolish to even question it.
Yeah, and much like how everybody in the Republican Party talks to the American people as though Trump is not a totally corrupt, crazy person and cover up everything that he does that is obviously anti their values, that they would have decried if anybody on the left did it. No. And they pretend it's totally fine. Rolling back corruption laws, rolling back not following the emoluments clause of the Constitution, not caring at all if he follows the process part.
We're going on different tangents.
You're acting as though the right is some great bastion of morality when it comes to calling out bullshit from their leader, and that's just not true. But I don't agree with a lot of boys on this topic. Great, and right as there are issues, so
my bigger issue is this to me seems a persistent patterns within the Democratic Party.
Let's go to the next topic.
Hillary didn't get actually nominated. Kamala didn't get actually nominated.
Yeah, that stuff I agree with you.
Like, how many years has it been since the Democrats have allowed the electorate to pick the candidate? Not since Obama. And sometimes
I agree with you.
Is the threat to democracy. I call total bullshit.
No, they both are threats to democracy in different ways. I totally agree. The Democrats
one is theoretical and one is actual.
No, they're both completely actual. The Democratic Party, I grant you this, is from the inside putting their thumb heavily on the scale and not allowing the people to decide who the candidate will be. Super fucked up, super anti-democratic, real problem. They did it to Bernie. They did it. They've done it now a lot. They forced Kamala.
Danger, like, get back to sanity. I want a sane Democratic Party.
And can you also cheers me on the Republican Party is doing it with regards to constitutional issues and election integrity lies, and they're pretending like there are issues that are not there.
I will not agree.
And that Jan 6 was somehow patriots going into the building.
I will not agree to it. First of all, I think that there's still a lot of information that is going to come out about January 6th. I think there's a lot of unusual things about January 6th.
That's a class, right?
I'm just saying.
there's just still now 4 years later a lot of things that have to come out, so we don't know. We can't make judgments based on obvious facts of people wearing 6 million weren't enough and bashing police officers in the face with the flagpole.
There were some very bad actors there
who are traitors to this nation.
No, I agree.
It shouldn't have been pardoned by the president.
I agree with that too. I think
Great. Cheers.
I think that some people were very bad actors there, but I think there were some people that were not.
I agree with that as well. So let's go on to the next topic.
Okay, let's go on to the next topic.
So the next topic is Trump's Middle East trip.
The Middle East trip. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Why don't we
start? Yeah.
I would like you first to say what you think the positives were. I think there were some positives, and then I can tell you how Trump had to also go there and muddy it and wreck it and ruin it. But I'd love to hear the positives first. Let's start on a positive note here.
I think what was done from beginning to end was part of Trump's overall plan to remake the global world order. And I think that it was a rejection of decades-long failure of American policy as it relates to a lot of regions in the world. We have somehow, for many years, Republican and Democrats, we have pursued a policy that basically says the only version of the only moral version or appropriate version of governance is American version of democracy. Now, look, I happen to love the American version of democracy, but I've also spent...
It doesn't sound that way from your argument so far.
No, it does.
You just don't want it spreading around the world.
It's that I'd be happy for it to spread around the world. That being said, our strategy of trying to spread it around the world has been a catastrophic failure for decades. And we keep repeating it. We keep wanting to look down the nose at certain countries, although we won't do that with other countries. We'll pick and choose who we want to wag our finger at and which ones we will forgive, right? Because somehow we have historically looked at, pick Saudi Arabia, and we wag our finger at Saudi Arabia and say, no, we can't do this. We can't participate in X, Y, and Z. And somehow, when it comes to China, which has plenty of human rights violations, does a lot of underhanded things, we've turned a blind eye to that. Overall. And I think what he's done is he's said, we're not doing that anymore. We are not exporting American democracy in the way we've done it before. We're not focused on changes. We're not focused on protracted wars for outcomes that don't work. We failed in Afghanistan. We failed in Iraq. We failed in Libya. We fail. And now he's taken a different tack and said, you know what? I'm going to bet on prosperity when nations are showing me that they are aimed at prosperity. And I think Saudi Arabia, and I think UAE is already a success story. They have demonstrated that they are aiming themselves at being global citizens, at participating in a global economy, at turning the page on both extremism and terrorism and things like that. And I think what he said is the way we're going to bring them closer is not by wagging a finger at them, but it's by doing business with them. We are going to integrate ourselves financially, economically, and he accomplishes a lot of things by doing that. He pushes them. He pushes them away from China, away from Russia, away from Iran, which I guess they're already away from Iran, and now all of a sudden we have some common ground that we can build off of in a way that doesn't require judgment around what they do in their country and with their culture.
Okay, so I think there's some good points there, and I don't disagree with his strategy on that writ large. Now, obviously, China is not our ally, and Saudi Arabia is, and so I think we've done a fair amount of finger wagging at China as well, and we've historically
more lately, right?
No, under Obama too. I think Obama actually more so was being very critical of the way the Uyghurs have been treated and being put into concentration camps, and Trump doesn't really mention it. And he seems to care more about looking the other way when it comes to human rights violations when he personally can financially benefit from it. And this trip of his, while it came with some good financial results for America if these deals hold up, which sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but potentially a lot of good money coming in as far as deals for the country, and also tons of deals for himself personally and his family, along with this trip, and building Trump Towers in Doha and building huge golf courses and resorts are being announced at the exact same time, and accepting a $400 billion airplane, $400 million airplane from,
not personally to the government.
It is personally, because he's keeping it for his own library, and he's going to keep,
which is also government, but
because he keeps it for personal use after his term until that happens 10 years later. If he wanted to keep it as Air Force One, it would stay with the next president as Air Force One. So he's pretty much taking the gift as himself, which is a violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution.
If it's a violation of the Emoluments Clause, then
do you feel good about it? I'm going to tell you more about what I agree with what you said. But first, do you feel good about his airplane being accepting an airplane?
From so Qatar. I go back and forth. So my instinct is no, I don't like it. Then
cheers on that, please.
No, I don't. But part of it is because I don't like Qatar. Like,
right, because
I've got a beef with Qatar. Look, I've got a beef with Qatar before all this happened. So what I don't understand, and look, I don't understand it with this administration, with the last administration, with any administration since we put that military base in 1996 under Bill Clinton. I don't understand why we have this relationship with Qatar. I don't. I can't understand it. Everybody I've spoken to, I've never got a good answer from it, and I've spoken to some people from within the administration.
Right.
So that being said, let's put that on side because they are an ally for.
But you agree that it is just blatant corruption. You agree that it is taking an airplane.
No.
And it's a security risk. You don't know what's in the airplane. Okay. You don't know if the thing is bugged. You don't know government it's set to explode. You don't know any of the things. But those are even like concerns.
Hold on.
Just in general, accepting a gift like that, and then him also announcing a deal to have huge Trump Tower. And
you want me to answer the question?
Well, I'm not done asking it and saying all the evidence
on the question.
And him saying he'd be stupid not to accept it. Actually, the smart thing a leader would do is to say, we don't accept gifts from foreign nations. We can make proper deals for our government, but I'm not taking an airplane.
So
I don't do that.
I don't view it as a personal gift. I don't. I just don't view it as a personal gift. They have given airplanes before to other leaders. It's like they've done it 3 other times before. I'm only giving you the information. I still don't love it because it's the Qataris. If it was the Saudis, I don't have a problem with it.
Right, the people that just bonesaw journalists to death.
It's not we talked about that before, but he was a Saudi citizen. He wasn't an American citizen.
Did we look that up? I thought he was.
I looked it up.
Okay.
Great. He was living in America, but he was a Saudi. He was a Saudi citizen.
Okay.
He was not an American citizen.
Okay.
But it's my bias against Qatar that leads me to do it because
what's the basis of your bias against Qatar?
I think they're bad actors. I think that they are spending billions of dollars on influencing education here in America. I think they are state sponsors of terror. They're not liked within the Middle East. The Saudis don't like them. The Emiratis don't like them. And I think that they're the sneakiest of them all because they pretend they're one thing and they another way. And somehow every administration since Bill Clinton has played along.
So should Trump not be making personal business deals that are clouding his judgment when it comes to Qatar during his presidency? Can you wait 4 years?
I think one has.
Why do it? And then why accept?
I have a much bigger issue with our military base. That's a real issue for me. I don't understand why.
That's at least an official government action, and we have a base there that actually protects our interests.
It's not exactly the case because, as I understand it, even the Qataris have said they will not allow America to use that base to launch an offensive on Iran, for example, which to me is like already game over.
They're not going to have any say once we have our assets placed there.
That's not my problem with the Qataris. So, but I don't want to now just go on a tangent.
Then back to what you were saying. Okay, so then
I don't love it, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. And I don't, and also to your point about, is it bugged, is all that plane is, it's, you know what, it's going to take a long time for that to be in service as Air Force One. Why? Because there's going to be a massive sweep, a retrofitting. There's so much.
Right.
He didn't fly at home.
Right. So he just needs the 40-year-old airplane just because he likes gifts, and he's a corrupt person. He doesn't mind. It's fully unnecessary. He has an Air Force One, and he's building a new one anyway.
Or some people might say, especially with Middle East culture, you're offered a gift. It's polite to accept.
So they're now setting how America does its business.
I said I don't like it, but I wouldn't call it corruption. I think corruption.
It's certainly corruption. You don't think Donald Trump is a corrupt businessman?
It's certainly not corruption. If it was corruption, it would be illegal, and it's not illegal.
Plenty corruption's legal in this country. That's a big problem. We have laws that need to be strengthened in major ways. You don't think our system is corrupt in general? You don't think the unlimited amounts of money in our political system and our elections is corrupt? It's all corruption.
I think there are lots of environment that enables corruption. But okay, go ahead.
So to your larger point about stopping to wag our finger.
Yeah.
I partially agree and I partially don't agree. I agree that we've not done a good job of nation building. I agree we've not done a good job.
Have we ever succeeded?
Yeah, we've not done a good job of this. But I do think it's important for America to be the moral leader of the world, to set the tone for what is acceptable behavior when it comes to human rights and when not, to be able to say this is the world, the way the world needs to evolve, and that we cannot just be transactional in our nature.
Is Saudi heading in the right direction?
Exceptions.
Is Saudi heading in the right direction?
I mean, slightly, kind of, they are. Like, I know you like to visit there, but women are sort of allowed to drive there now because they made this one little concession, but still women don't have anywhere near full rights, and it's still a very Islamic extremist place to live, and a very fundamentally strict place, and that does not allow freedom of movement, freedom of religion, freedom of expression in any way. That is the way the world should work. And I think that it is actually not America first. I think it's actually weak for America to just relinquish its hegemony in the world and say, whatever, do it how you like, do what you want. We're not going to anymore care to say that the way the world needs to move is towards one of freedom and human rights and democracy. I think once we lose, we're one of the few, we're the strongest nation on earth, and we're the only one that has always had this moral compass pointing towards that improved, more perfect world. And to give that up just so we can make business deals and build golf courses and build infrastructure projects seems short-sighted to me.
So are you pro-isolationism?
Am I pro-isolationism? No, I'm not pro-isolationism.
How many countries, like, do we want to be? Are we going to?
You guys really more so are in the America First way.
I don't think that. I think this trip, it flies in the face of what I think are false claims that this administration is isolationist. They're not isolationist. They just went and did massive deals, and what I'd say is, it's a theoretical nicety to say we are going to exert some type of pressure on people, and we're not going to be in business with them. We're not going to do things if they don't behave in the exact manner of how we behave.
We're talking about exact manners, though. We're talking
about. But they're moving. This is a multi-thousand-year culture that is moving towards the right thing.
Okay, so how do you feel about?
I'm gonna give you a different perspective overall in a macro sense, and it's something that I've been thinking about for months. And I actually think this concept of Western values is kind of over.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Elaborate.
I will elaborate. And so imagine two graphs. Which countries are improving human rights and which countries are taking away human rights? And when I look at England, and I just saw another one of these heartbreaking videos yesterday, they literally arrested a woman for praying in her head. They asked her.
Yeah, I saw that video on your stories. And you have to start watching my stories, by the way, so you know what I'm posting on the other side. I don't know. You didn't see my Ja Rule videos. New big fan of mine.
I can't be at the beck and call of your stories as much as
Okay, I mean, was that even a real video? It looked insane.
But it's That's not the first time I've seen
It was a real video. She was
That
praying in her hands and she got arrested.
They asked her, "Are you praying?" She said, "In my head."
Right.
And
But then why do they allow the Muslim call to prayer? It doesn't make sense. Isn't that the same thing?
Because something is wrong in England. Something is rotten in England. And
it's
something
not
is
just
rotten
their
in
teeth,
France.
am I wrong?
And so, exactly. And so when I look at the path England is going, I look at on the decline. When I look at France, on the decline. And so I start to think, if I go look at macro of like, where are we heading and who should we start to think are good partners for the future? England and France. Why? Because we've been partners with them in the past. I think they can't figure themselves out. I think they're doing things that are really anti-democracy. I know they don't have freedom of speech laws like we do, but it's awful.
But I don't understand your theory about Western values. Western values is different than Western democracies that might be failing at those values.
Because I think Western values, I am calling into question whether the values of England and France are values that align with our values. That's let me say it differently. I call into question whether the values in England and France align with American values, because I don't think they do anymore. I think that they are destroying
with
freedom
regard
of speech.
Specifically to religious expression.
I think freedom of speech is another thing that's under threat. I think there is the rampant anti-Semitism is astonishing, is heartbreaking and astonishing to me. I think the anti-Israelism that we're seeing, and again, I'm looking at the trend and the trends for England and France on all those things, on freedom of speech, on anti-Semitism, on the way they're conducting themselves with Israel, down, down, down. And I look at the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and I look at their trend lines, and I go, huh, they're trending in a better direction. Are they at pace with us? No. But when
I think those are good points, Lee. I think those are good points. And then how do you feel about Trump meeting with Syria's new leader and normalizing and removing all of the sanctions on Syria without getting any concessions from them first, and saying it's an honor to do it? A man who is still technically on our terrorist list and who was a leader in Al-Qaeda in Iraq and was fighting U.S. troops. How do you feel about that part of Trump's trip?
So, look, talk about a curveball.
Mm-hmm.
That was a curveball to me. And certainly, I don't think al-Jilani, the terrorist formerly known as al-Jilani, is some, shining example on the hill. But I think what he's doing is strategic. I think what that move is, first of all, if Syria joins the Abraham Accords,
which he indicated they're open to doing as soon as they get their house in order, and that's a positive, a huge positive.
And look, what might have led to it is al-Jilani said it. Al-Jilani said he's got no beef with Israel. Do I trust him? Hell no.
Right.
But he said it, and we know in the Arab world, if anything, they're not one to talk about such things.
Right, and they've agreed to not contest the Golan Heights and the safe zone outside of it, which is also helpful for them joining the Abraham Accords.
And what else does it? Trump kind of pulling Syria and al-Jilani closer to us. What does it do? It distances them from Russia. It distances them from China. And look, I think this is another complicated. I think they're a bad actor. Turkey, who's another ally of ours, it now distances them from Turkey. And so, was it jarring to see him standing with al-Jilani? Yes. Is there something that could be strategically brilliant about it? Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of remains to be seen.
Of course.
Which Trump himself said. He said he has a good feeling about this guy. We'll see how it shakes out. He said he talked to Erdogan. Erdogan says good things about him. And
but do you agree that but this is again, go to the macro. What Trump is doing is he is throwing out the playbook that has failed us, that feels good, feels nice to say, well, we're only going to do business with people that align perfectly with American values.
Right.
It's just not realistic.
I hear that.
And so he's a pragmatist. And he's a pragmatist. He doesn't want war. And
he also just loves strong men as well. And it gives him kind of cover to not have as much of a moral imperative here at home.
But that's okay.
It's true. He has a soft spot for dictators and for authoritarians, and it helps him to say, "Look, the world's not
I
as
think people have
much
that
about
wrong
values."
because again, it's so funny because so much of the outlook, especially how the media talks about things, is it's as if they want us to wear our strategy on our sleeve. And so what do you think is better in general when when you are the leader of the free world? Is it better not to have a conversational relationship with a Vladimir Putin,
No, I think
or even a
conversation's
King Jong?
better. I agree.
And is it not better to actually have even a convivial relationship, even if it's just to try and get to a place humans are humans. There's a way to deal with people and to talking purple. And so the, I understand like what the media wants Trump to do is they want him to publicly shame Putin and publicly shame Kim Jong Un and publicly shame President Xi. But is that tactically smart? It's not. It's the same way. It's like business. And again, the guy's a business guy, and he's coming in with that idea. You've got to go make a deal with somebody who's kind of an enemy or a frenemy, whatever. You want to cozy up to them. You don't want to come out with the dagger in your teeth.
I understand.
You want to come with a flower.
And I agree with that as far as like personality strategy, and that's all fine and good, but then it also doesn't lead to him being tough when it comes to policy or negotiations. Like, for example, when his proposed peace deal with Ukraine and Russia is giving Russia practically everything that they want, then being nice to Putin personally and giving him territory when he invaded a sovereign nation that's an ally of ours, that's a problem. That's a real issue. And being afraid to actually put sanctions on in an aggressive way or put America's full threat of force and toughness and say, no, there's right and wrong in this world. And Trump likes to muddy that line as well. And that's where it's a problem. And even with his policy when it comes to China, look at, he put on this enormous tariffs that he then just backtracked and basically lost that confrontation, reducing it now, to 30% from 145% tariff.
Look, we can talk about, I think that the issue in Crimea is also more complicated than.
And not just Crimea, it's the territories that have been taken since Crimea that he wants to give them from this war.
Yeah, I think part of what he's advocating for is to stop spending our money on a war that's unwinnable.
No, but he's suggesting a solution to the war that makes Russia happy and that gives up territory of the nation that's our ally that was attacked. And that's a problem.
And maybe what he's recognizing is what is the end going to be? What is it going to look like? And should more people die? And should we go spend hundreds of billions of dollars more to get there? Or should we just cut to the chase? Really, I mean, I can understand how there's something that does feel like maybe it's even distasteful to get there.
Distasteful. There's just no more morality in the world now. There's no more right and wrong according to your world.
You're choosing which morality you want to advocate for. So I understand, and I think that it has merit to say, hey, he was the aggressor, although there are some people that don't view it as he was the aggressor, that when NATO was kind of rattling this cage about potentially putting, about including Ukraine into NATO, that did it. But let me get back to my.
That shouldn't be seen as an aggression if you're not going to be an aggressor to your neighbor. You can't be part of an organization that protects itself, and if you aren't a dick to them, that's fine.
But again, there are complicated issues around even how Russians are treated in Ukraine. Again, what my main point is, you're picking the morality and saying this is the morality that I'm focused on, which is, hey, that was land that Ukraine had. He came in to seize it, and we shouldn't be war, shouldn't we? The morality, on the other hand, is there are thousands of people dying every week. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars, and there is no end. What it looks like is this war will continue. Ukraine can't win it, certainly without a lot of help from us. So I look at it as saying there are two aspects of morality to look at. One is, do we want to say, hey, we're going to punish Putin for these actions, or and by doing that we're going to sacrifice a lot of people and a lot of money to say, you know what, we think that the conclusion of this war will end largely in what Putin wants anyway. Let's just make peace and get there. And I think
I would hear your point if it weren't also and then empowering Putin to continue on rebuilding the USSR and putting the Soviet Union back together and taking more territory and feeling like these wars are going to end with him getting what he wants regardless.
But again, I think that
this monster. The world is not only pragmatism, it's also morality, and it's also how you want to move the future. But we have to move on to our third topic in a second. But one last point of this issue of back to our issue about the Middle East trip is so being that you see that Trump is much more about niceties and relationships and pragmatism over morality, you can see a pattern where he doesn't put his foot down for what is necessarily in the moral or long-term best interest of our nation always, oftentimes for his own self. Like, for example, the issue not as much being the $400 million jet, but the $5.5 billion luxury golf resort that was announced to be built for Trump in Qatar at the exact same time. You know that then Trump is not going to be aggressive against Qatar doing things that are against American interests when it's going to affect billions of dollars of his business. He's never shown himself to be a person that does that can even separate those things.
I don't know that that's the case. I hope it's, and we'll see. But again, like most arguments against Trump, they tend to be about some future state of what will happen rather than what exists. And
no, I mean, these are real deals that are happening, but we have to move on. So we will just see. It will unfold as it does.
Yeah, I would just say overall, I think what he's done in the Middle East is a jujitsu move as far as, American hegemony in the world. I think we have been ceding our own hegemony.
What do you think about the fact that he didn't go to Israel on this trip?
Don't love it, but I think I don't know if it's a hope or if it's an assessment or maybe it's both. I think it's interesting or notable that while Trump is entertaining these leaders in the Gulf states, that Israel mounted a new intense offensive against Hamas. And I think it's notable that those two things happened at the same time. And so, again, there is what sounds nice on the ears and what is strategic and tactically sound. And so would it feel better if he went to Israel? Yes. Might it been a strategy to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be occupied, go clean up? Because look, one thing I know that Trump has been pressuring Netanyahu about is go do it fast, clean it up, don't make it protect.
And I do like that he also insisted that they start letting aid back into the Palestinian territories, into Gaza. I mean, you can't.
And already Hamas is stealing them.
Yeah, but so you mitigate that, and there's a new plan to mitigate that, but you don't starve people.
Somehow Egypt is off the hook of giving aid. So
Well, I agree. Totally, Egypt needs to also, but also Israel doesn't allow aid from Egypt to come in unfettered, and they have to check every single item, and that for good reason. All different. All different topic. Okay. So we can't go into that right now. So into our last topic now. The big, beautiful bill that Trump has proposed to remake essentially so much of the priorities of the federal government, to enshrine into permanent law his 2017 tax cuts that disproportionately favor the wealthy, that actually hurt the poorest Americans. Why? What?
No. Why do you say it disparate?
Why? I'll tell you exactly why. I'll tell you exactly why. Okay. Happy to tell you exactly why. Okay. So, analysis shows that the legislation's taxes and new policies cutting Medicaid by $700 billion, SNAP food assistance program by $300 billion.
So about over 10 years?
Over 10 years, household resources would fall by about 2% of income for the lowest income 10% of households by 2027 and 4% by 2033. They cannot afford a 1% to be gone due to these changes. Would lead to nearly $1 trillion less federal spending on these programs, will lead to people losing their health care coverage, estimated 7 to 8 million Americans losing their health care coverage.
people will have more optionality. Okay.
No, they have a lot more optionality. They will lose their healthcare coverage. It's not true. There was 12 to 13 million that will be affected, and of that, 3 to 5 million will be likely to get employer-based healthcare or get onto Obamacare, and 7 to 8 million will estimated lose their healthcare. That's just a fact. And so if it's so important to pass tax cuts for the richest people in the world and in the country and have people lose healthcare in a system that is already incredibly broken and lose very needed nutritional assistance, which will affect children who are in need.
So you talk about SNAP?
SNAP.
Okay, let's talk about SNAP.
Yeah.
So SNAP, what's the proposal?
The proposal is to get rid of $300 million.
Let's talk about the annual. Let's talk about it annually.
Okay.
So here's part of. Okay, so it's been at 25. It's 112, almost 113 billion a year. Okay.
Yeah.
The proposal is a reduction of about 5 billion a year. Okay. It's not reduction from this year. Now, what's interesting and I think a really important marker to evaluate all of these cuts is what happened during the pandemic. And so if you go back in 2019, right, we just said he wants to reduce SNAP to $108 billion. What was SNAP pre-pandemic in 2019? $63 billion. So during the pandemic, like a lot of government spending, which went totally out of control, they doubled the spending of SNAP during the pandemic. Okay, maybe there was a thesis that they needed to do it because of other issues going on. And so, again, we look at it and it's like if you measure the cutting during a narrow window, it looks like, oh, look what Trump is doing. He's reducing this. People need it. And yet somehow $63 billion a year was enough in 2019. And so it's still dramatically more. So my point is, it's easy to demonize him, to say, well, he's reducing SNAP. How could he do it? Well, the reason is that it was overly inflated during the pandemic.
Yes, poor people get so much extra food these days that they can cut.
But there's a lot of it.
But it's okay to cut taxes for the richest. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, but who? Okay, when you say the cut it,
you've multiple times said that you're unaware that this tax plan benefits the wealthy. That's the whole purpose of the tax plan. And also, it increases the deficit. I mean, the debt by $4 trillion over 10 years.
So there is
$5 trillion. So let's start. $2 trillion this coming year.
You want to just spit all of it? You want to talk about the pieces?
Go ahead.
Okay, so let's talk about who it benefits. So it benefits half of the benefits are for the top 10% earners. That's true. That being said, it caps out. So why does it affect those people? It affects primarily business owners of small to medium-sized businesses. And why do I say that? You're talking about the 20% deduction, right? The pass-through deduction. That's
just one small part of it.
Okay, but that's a major part of it. But if you earn over $200,000 a year, you're not eligible for that. And so when I look at what that tax cut does, that provides relief for the backbone of the middle of what is creating middle class opportunities. People who have small businesses, people who have medium-sized businesses. That is the heart of America. That is what prosperity is based on. And so that's why I'll say, yeah, okay, 50% of those are for those people who will in turn.
That one small part might be capped out at 200,000. I didn't even hear that number, but I'll believe your number on it. $68,000 tax cut for millionaires, $300,000 tax cut for households in the top 0.1%, while raising taxes or doing nothing, turning which rates, for 33 million working class households, while also raising the debt ceiling by $4 trillion when he already raised it $7 trillion during his first administration.
Don't give me whatever you have on the other side of the equal sign. Tell me which policies you're talking about.
I'm telling you specifically, People making less than $17,000 a year will have to pay $1,000 more. They'll lose $1,000. People making $17,000 to $51,000 will lose $700. People making over $4.3 million a year will gain $389,000. That's class warfare.
I think that
That's class warfare.
I think that your numbers are. I mean, I just
no. Your numbers are grand. You are right, but mine are off. Those are correct. No,
what I want to know is when these policies not because there is nothing. There is no policy that says if you make less than $17,000, you got to owe another $1,000.
Yeah, there absolutely is. It changes the tax rates. Changes the amount of things you can deduct. It also, if you make less than $15,000 a year, their estimate would see their federal taxes increase by 74% by 2031. It's just not caring about people at the lowest levels financially in this country. Trump swore that he would never sign a bill, would veto a bill that touched in any way Medicaid, and now he's stopped saying that in the last 3 weeks because now he's cutting Medicaid in a very significant way. These are people that are the most vulnerable in our nation, and to do anything when they're already struggling, when the wealth gap, the earning gap, the gap is so enormous already between the haves and have-nots, to make that even one drop worse is unconscionable, I think. And to do it where you're actually affecting people in deep ways so you can give very rich people bigger tax cuts and bigger tax exemptions and allow them to write off untold more, have lower tax rates. That is not a priority that a moral nation should do. So now you're going to be arguing for not pushing for morality abroad and also not pushing for moral code here in America?
Because I think your characterization of what the tax cuts are incorrect. Which is why I want to talk about. Tell me the
incorrect
policy.
In what way? Tell me how it's correct.
What are the cuts? So number one, it's the extension of the previous cuts, right? The reduction of corporate tax from 21% back
15.
to 18
to 15.
I thought it was 18.
15.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree.
It's 15.
Okay, okay. So it's allowing deductions for interest rates on American cars. It's
rolling back any sort of incentives for green cars or electric cars. So now we're also hurting our environment thrown in there as well. There's that.
See, coming from the side who is firebombing Tesla dealerships. Look, at some point, either these businesses are going to succeed or not. There's enough adoption around EVs that it's
so. Of course, you're for ending all farm subsidies, big oil subsidies, and big farm as well. Right? We need to get rid of all of those.
I actually think
the
farm subsidies. I think most farmers don't want the subsidies. I think that they want to be able to grow.
But maybe if you're going to keep any subsidies, maybe you do it for burgeoning industries like new technologies and like green technologies.
It depends. I think some burgeoning technology. I think yes, some of them, some that we think have a good road and a positive road. I think we should. Things like wind seems destined for failure, and we probably
why? Because it causes cancer. The windmills cause cancer that Trump likes to make up.
No, that's not why.
Well, he says it all the time.
It's just it's inefficient. It doesn't work. It doesn't work as a business. It doesn't work. It doesn't create enough.
So you're comfortable with this new tax bill, this big beautiful bill, taking away the health insurance of millions of vulnerable Americans?
I don't think that that's going to be the outcome. I think that's
just making that up completely. That's just indisputably what every congressional budget office says. The Penn-Wharton budget model says the exact same thing. Goldman Sachs says this plan is going to be very bad for the economy. Says that his import duty being paid by America.
You're dumping on things. You want to talk. You got to talk about. Let's talk about specific issues. You're dumping a bunch of.
Gave you one specific thing with 3 references.
No, you're talking about Goldman. You're talking about Goldman saying it's going to be bad for the economy. That has nothing to do with the medical point. Okay, that's my. But
great.
So let's stick with
it because you're denying my numbers on that. So I don't know what else to do. Everyone agrees that this will leave millions of people without health care. I grant you that the Medicaid part of it is for people that don't have dependents. Okay, so it's people that don't have dependents. There's veterans in there. There's some elderly in there. But okay, those people will now lose health insurance when our country already does a piss poor job of giving health insurance.
They're not going to lose their health. We'll see.
You can't debate that way. You can't say they're not going to lose their health insurance. They are. According to everybody, they will lose their health insurance. They will. There are certain work requirements being put on Medicaid for the first time ever.
I don't think it's the first time
First time
ever.
ever. First time ever.
Okay. Well,
First
listen,
time ever. It is.
Well, look, do you think that there's fraud in the system regarding that? Do you think that there are
Getting rid of
people?
fraud is different than kicking people off. You can acknowledge that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's problem one. Problem two, all of your so-called touted Doge cuts. Why are we now then trying to pass a bill that increases our spending by trillions a year? So there was actually no purpose to cutting all of these jobs that help us stay safe, that help our image abroad, that help keep people safe, and help keep Social Security running well, help the FAA running well. Cut all of that, and then take people out of Medicaid coverage. They have no health insurance. Then get rid of people who are poor, having food assistance. Children, millions, estimated up to 4 million children will lose food.
This is also sounds also
and do all that to increase military spending by 150 billion a year, then increase spending overall by giving tax cuts by trillions of dollars. Our budget goes up. Then why? What's the purpose to cut if we're increasing the budget? The purpose of Doge was supposed to be to get rid of $2 trillion in costs, not to increase $2 to $5 trillion in costs.
The concept is to enable businesses to spend money, to save money, so they can help build this economy and help rebuild the middle class.
But it's I'm not arguing with the business part. I'm talking about the individual tax cut part.
No, but that's not it. The cuts that you're talking about are predominantly they're for the business owners. They're not
that is not true.
That is true.
It's personal taxes.
It's not personal. You're talking that those reductions are mainly going to be enjoyed by people who have small to medium sized businesses. And those people that is the main part of what employs people in this country.
That is not true, my friend. That literally is not true. We
need a fact moderator.
Okay. Top 1 by 2025, households in the top 1% are projected to receive an average tax cut of $61,000. The bottom 60% would see less than $500 in savings. This translates to a 2.9% increase in after-tax income for the top 1% compared to just 0.4% for the bottom quintile, and the very bottom, like we said, actually has to pay more and their rates go up. That's just fact. Then there's a 20% pass-through business deduction. Then there's the estate tax changes that doubling up to $11 million tax-free, benefiting only the wealthiest 0.2% of estates, and reducing our government income. But somehow it's so important to increase income in all ways that affect vulnerable people and affect programs, but not that affect the wealthy. We have to give them more money. We just have to do it.
I don't think that's that. I think your recitation of what's happening with the top 1% is not right. I think
it is. You're very afraid to acknowledge it. I understand that. You don't want to be aware of those parts of what's happening with these.
That's not my research about it. It is debated. It's clearly debated. I'm telling you that in my assessment, that's not where the tax cuts are.
You're unaware of any personal tax effects of Trump's plans, of Trump's tax cuts. The fact that it is just
it's the extension. It's the extension of those tax
trillions of dollars of reduction in revenue for our government to be able to give tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans.
It's not the wealthiest Americans. Like I said, it caps out. A lot of these deductions cap out after a certain income. It's meant for it. 50% of the tax cuts impact the top 10% earners. That's true. Now, happens to be those top 10% of earners, account for over 70% of the entire tax revenue.
And the top 1% would receive an average tax cut of $100,000. Necessary? The top 1% need a tax cut?
No. If that's the case, then no, that's not necessary.
Great. So that's a big part of the plan. And it cannot be
big, just so you know, because there's not that many people. There's very few people.
But the amount of money is enormous.
If you're saying it's $100,000 a person, there's not that many people in there.
It's millions of people still. The top 1% has like 3 million people in it. So that's 3 million times $100,000 is a huge amount of money.
Okay.
And also, just so you're aware,
I would say top 1% of earners don't need a tax cut.
Correct.
I would say the tax cuts for the bulk of the top 10%, I think that's going to have a trickle down effect. Those are the people that create companies. Those are the people that create jobs.
Except in the first time these tax cuts went through, what actually happened instead of those tax cuts leading to more job creation, it was just mostly given through stock buybacks and dividends to the stockholders, and the money did not circulate back.
No, but usually when a company buys back their stock, they also that's part of that ends up being part of a strategy to reinvest in their business. If there's a reason why you want more stock, right? If you're going to build that business, it's going to be more valuable. You're buying it back now. It means that you're betting on it being more valuable later, right? And so you're going to take steps in order to create that heightened value. So I look at that. To me, it's part of the overall plan. This is pro-business, reducing regulations,
Anti-Main Street, anti-normal people. Because also you're aware of not just these cuts to
small businesses are normal people. It's not poor.
Yeah, but do you know that
people pay very little in taxes?
Do you know that part of right?
Do you know that 50% of the population, the people that make $50,000 a year or less, they pay 5%. That's like half of the country, and they pay 5% of the taxes.
Because that's near the poverty line.
Okay, so I'm just saying they're already
and they're still paying taxes, whereas big corporations are paying 0% tax.
That's not true.
That is true.
That's not. They're not paying 0%.
Apple and Amazon, these companies are paying 0.
They're using different. Then go change the tax code.
Correct.
Go make it.
This is changing it more favorable to them instead of less. No. That's what it's doing.
True.
And also, just so you're aware, it's not even the direct cuts, right? But the cuts to SNAP. These SNAP programs are engines on Main Street. They literally feed the economies. They put food on the shelves. They employ people at these grocery stores, right? 300.
We've just established that budget doubled in the last few years. Don't you think that it's smart to look at all of this spending pre-pandemic and to see because what do we know? We know that there were a tremendous amount of government programs that received much more money as a result of the pandemic. Shouldn't we level set? Shouldn't we look at that and say, you know what? It's time to recalibrate this regardless of if it sounds, again, it's the difference between what sounds right and it doesn't sound nice, right? You hear, oh, he's cutting SNAP. Oh my God, the sky is falling. He's cutting SNAP. But then when you look at it and go, well, SNAP doubled its budget a few years ago. Maybe we can bring it down a little bit.
And we reduced rich people's tax rates a couple years ago, and yet we don't bring that back down. We enshrine that in law forever.
Well, maybe
why
the problem
is priority balance
is the regulations that we have in this country are also stifling business. I think he's trying to create an environment.
It can't be only about benefiting. Clearly, he's doing that, but need to do it not on the backs of poor people, and certainly not on their health care, not food for children. That's just basic humanity. I know you also live in this immoral world.
It's not
about pragmatism.
It's what I'm saying is the narrative around SNAP is a bullshit narrative. It's a bullshit narrative. If it was $63 billion a year in 2019, and it's 100.
I've never seen that number. You're going to question my numbers. I want to see that number.
Okay.
But why are you reducing that back, and you're not, and you're giving more money to the richest? That just shows your priorities.
This is what I'll say. I'm again. If it's benefiting the top 1%, I don't think it needs to. And anything that's benefiting the 1%, I'm not for that. All the things that benefit businesses, I think that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be a business-friendly country.
I agree.
When you look at...
I'm a business owner. I agree with that.
But so part of it is, if you want to get a window into what the Republican version of it versus a Democratic version of it, look at the states. Look at California versus Texas or Florida. And you can see when you have a state that is a Democratic supermajority, you create an environment that is incredibly anti-business, really unfriendly to business. That's California. That's what Democratic policies, unfettered Democratic policies, get us. And that's
not true. I run my business in California, and I do fine.
Plenty of people do fine, but it is not a friendly state to do business. It's just not. It's not. I've run businesses here for a long time. It's not a friendly state.
You're changing topics yet again. Okay, so, and the other unintended or maybe intended consequence of reducing Medicaid payments and funding is that a lot of that is how hospitals determine their funding, and especially in rural and low-income areas. That's your phone now agreeing with me. Is that the president calling?
Should somebody push through the silence?
So
Course.
that's hospitals in low, especially in rural and low income areas, that are then not going to know what their funding is, that are going to have to pass the cost onto the people who are paying through employer-based healthcare, through people that are paying through the Affordable Care Act. People that premiums are going to go up for even the level above that. The hospitals are going to have to absorb that. And oftentimes these hospitals are going to have to even shut down because they are unable to handle these increases in costs. And it's just not part of the mentality of those making this bill to make sure that any changes you make to help business and to help the richest people does at the very least the golden rule, which is just do unto others what you would never do unto you, which is not make life harder for poor areas and poor people. And if we can't meet that we're failing as a nation.
I certainly don't want that to be the outcome.
Great. Cheers on that general concept, huh?
All right.
I love it. Perfect.
Okay.
And I think that then brings the episode to a close. Are there any last thoughts, any things you want to leave people with? And then we can go into some quick plugs and leave people for anticipation of next week's showdown.
No, I think that's it. I think you know, it's never a dull moment in with this administration, with
Facts, we agree on that.
with the world. I think it's I think sparks fly every week, and so we'll be here to cover them every week.
Absolutely. You can follow at Lee Trink on all social media. You can follow at Ben Gleib, Gleib, on all social media. And subscribe to my podcast if you like Last Week on Earth. I also, this Sunday, have the 5th anniversary of my virtual show where you can escape from politics to a very silly virtual worldwide town. 5th anniversary of Gleib Off the Top, crowd work and improvised madness, and just come camera on, mic on, and just have fun with me. We drink or smoke during the show. We're very silly. You get to ask questions. We don't keep it clean at all. And you can get tickets at nowherecomedy.com. And you can subscribe to my non-adult, non-sexual OnlyFans to get a free ticket to that by looking at my social media, how to do it, onlyfans.com/Ben Gleib. I'm pimping more projects than you. Lee.
Just keeping it clean.
Just keeping it very simple. I love that. Always good talking with you, Lee. Good conversation. I loved winning the episode.
We concluded as usual. That is on the wrong side of history.
No, I am on the wrong side of history podcast. We don't even have a staff here whatsoever.